Welcome. This is the September 2017 episode of the Toonzone Podcast. We've been away for a little while, but we're back on a great occasion, which is the 25th anniversary of Batman the Animated Series. And with me, I got some great people to talk about that and much more. First, of course, is Eileen Cruz.
Hey, how you doing?
Hello, hello. And also with us is James Harvey, who runs the World's Finest.
Hey.
Yeah, and if you guys haven't been there, it's worldfinestonline.com.
I think World's Finest has been around since the late 90s, which is pretty much forever in internet time, so...
98.
Count me impressed. And also with us is Andrei Logigan, moderator on the DC Animation Forum. Some of you folks might know him as RoyalRubble. Hello, hello.
Hi, everyone.
This is going to be a very DC animation-oriented podcast in honor of that anniversary I talked about. So to start with, James, I'd be remiss to not ask about, the history of the World's Finest. Can you tell us about how that got going?
I remember back, I'm not sure if you guys can remember back this far, but around 97 or so, there was this website called the Animated Bat. And it was run by, his username was Robin3, but his real name was Barry. And as that got going, it was like a fairly popular site. The internet was newish at the time, and there was not a lot of like Batman-themed websites. So he kind of had a big thing growing. And at the same time, I just had like a few forums hosted at InsideTheWeb.com, if you guys can remember those old boards. And I had one, and since the Animated Bat had one for Batman, I started one for Superman and Batman Beyond. And one day he just sort of dropped me a message and he asked, like, would you mind if you would bring your boards over here so we could cover everything, since at that time, like, Batman just appeared in Superman the Animated Series, Batman Beyond was taking off, and he was starting to branch out into the Batman appearances that didn't happen on Batman the Animated Series. And I said sure, and he and I sort of became like good buddies and stuff. And after a while, I just sort of started, I just sort of wrote up a few reviews for him, and he and I would talk here and there, and eventually he wanted to expand his website to include Superman and Batman Beyond, so I helped him with that, and the Animated Bat from there became, I remember the long name was like Batman, Superman, and Beyond, the World's Finest, and so it became sort of that big-ish site, and then at that time he became busy with personal projects, and I lucked into meeting Zach Demeter, who you guys know as Bird Boy on the forums, and he was just this guy who blew my mind with what he could do with like designs and graphics and all that, and as luck would have it, he was great with writing as well. So I brought him on board to sort of help me keep the World's Finest going, and then it just sort of got bigger and bigger from there as like once Justice League came around and they started doing the Batman, we opted to start covering all those. The DC DTV movies, we started covering those, and it just kept on growing. And as we were doing the website, he also wanted to hone his own like skills and stuff, so he always offered to do like these little special sub-sites and stuff, and he and I would like crack heads on things we could do for the site, like little special things, like we had the little sub-site for the Heart of Ice episode because that won a poll that we did on the forums once, and we did a 15th anniversary page for Mask of the Phantasm, and we would just sort of do all these little special things. He loved Batman the Animated Series and that whole world, but he also wanted to grow his skill, and that just sort of was the perfect combination at the time, and things just kept on getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And in the late 90s, like online media was kind of new, and I was sort of in there at the right time where I could just email an artist or a voice actor or call them, and it would be as simple as pie to talk to them, and there'd be no like press agents in between or no guidelines you had to follow, anything like that. It was just like the perfect time. Like that's how I lucked out. Like Stan Berkowitz was my first ever phone interview, and it was amazing. And then from there I lucked out with like Alan Burnett, Dwayne McDuffie, and I think at that time like Toonzone was gigantic, and we had those people coming on the boards to read our feedback on those episodes, and it was just this perfect like combination of everything coming together. Like the online press was just sort of new, so I had all these little ins, and I'm very persistent and stubborn and very annoying, and I can eventually find my way to someone if I try hard enough. And I just lucked out with being able to talk to all the great directors and writers and some of the voice actors. Kevin Conroy is one of the few who I've never had the chance to interview, and hoping that'll change one day. And it was just sort of everything sort of fell into place at just the right time. Like just everything, and I lucked out extensively with like Toonzone, especially like having that name, the Toonzone name, really helped me sort of get my foot in the door for a few interviews. Like I remember early press agents. They knew who they knew who and what Toonzone was, and I'd make like a quick call or send a quick email, and I said, "Hi, I'm James Harvey. I'm James Harvey at the World's Finest, hosted by Toonzone," and they say, "Oh yeah, you guys, all right, sure. Just send your questions, and we'll approve them, and we'll have you call back in a half hour."
Interesting. So really back then it was all a lot more informal.
Yes, it was super informal, and I think that really sort of helped the World's Finest get that cachet of being able to find out whatever needed to be found out and nab those really good interviews and stuff. It was a lot of great timing, just in terms of where we were at that time, and like with the internet, the burgeoning online fan base, and like again the cachet and name of Toonzone. It was just everything came together at just the right time.
And I know that I must have emailed you or something at some point, but I don't remember exactly how we met online because I've just known you for so long.
I do. I totally do, because I used to post on the Toonzone forums.
Okay.
Because I remember I would talk to Gookie. Yeah, because you had the old WBC boards, and I posted on there, and I you know what? I honestly actually can't remember how you and I first started talking as well. Mm-hmm. Maybe I came to you at some point with like a request or an idea or a question or something, and it just sort of grew from there.
So far as having our forums together, it's always been sort of a mutually beneficial thing because we were able to, sort of exchange audiences.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, it just, Kids WB, they had Animaniacs,
right.
Like they had Batman, they had all the awesome shows that we loved as kids just in one place, and with Batman added to the group, and it all just kind of came together so perfectly.
It ended up being a really cool thing. I'm really happy to have known you for so long.
Oh, me too. It's been an insane pleasure, and it's given me a wealth of opportunities. Like actually, I know some of the interviews that I did online, I eventually submitted them like when I was in journalism school way back when, and I get like A+. I know there was one write-up I did for the World's Finest that I submitted in journalism class. Solid A on it. It was really awesome. It got me like my first like newspaper gig, and it was great for like working at the World's Finest and helping with Toonzone and everything. That really helped me, like, I don't want to say perfect my craft because I still need a lot of help when it comes to my writing. I'm in desperate need of an editor. But it really like was a huge beneficial thing in so many ways to my life.
Well, I'm really glad that you were able to make it all work for you, because obviously you wouldn't have been able to do it without your talent to begin with. But I'm glad that Toonzone was able to be a part of that.
Yeah, it's been fantastic.
Also, I want to apologize to our audience here for a moment, because this is actually the first time that Jim and I have ever spoken in person.
Wow.
I know, right? I must sound really Canadian, right? Do I?
You sound, there's a little bit, I can hear a little bit of the Canadian there, but I'm sure you can hear a lot of the New York over here.
A little bit.
What about you, Andrei? How'd you come into the community? Was it through World's Finest or some other way?
If I remember correctly, I was looking at the World's Finest and the Marvel Animation Age at the time. I was looking for more complete episode guides for all the shows, all the animated shows. And that's how I found them. I didn't join the forums at the moment. Later on, I joined. But I've been a member for almost 7 years, I think, or 8 years, I don't know.
That's really cool.
And it's a fun community. I rarely part in other forums apart from the Marvel and DC boards.
So something I'm a little curious about, you guys were talking about the fandom a bit earlier. I'm wondering, do you feel like it changed in some way now compared to what it was back in the old days?
It has, but it sort of hasn't. I can remember when Teen Titans got canceled, I would get emails being blamed for it. I've had some really weird experiences with the fandom, but like at one point, there seems to be this core group that really loves it and they're really into it, and they kind of understand the pros and cons that come with any animated series or fandom. And then there's this other subset, which, man, it can get ugly sometimes. It's interesting.
They hate watch.
I know.
It's so weird.
Why would you hate watch?
Don't you have to? You have to have things that are better to do with your time than hate watch something.
I know, right? Like, why waste your time?
Go watch something you like.
I know. I never understood the concept of that, of hate watching. I never understood it.
But how will people understand how bad things are if people don't hate watch?
Touche.
By reading online comments.
Because you see, I would understand watching something that's perhaps, because I do love B movies.
Oh, me too, yeah.
So I understand watching a movie that's not that great, but there is entertainment value there for other reasons.
Exactly.
Maybe it had a good heart, but the technical skills were not there, or they're unintentionally funny and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I get it, but not the hate watching.
No. Like we've all seen The Room, and we all watch it for like the same reason.
Oh, yeah.
It's a terrible movie, but it's so amazing. But I never understood why someone would like just be really aggressive against any show just for the sole reason of just being like, oh, this sucks. Like, I could do this so much better. I don't know. I could never wrap my head around why someone would watch a show that they find so repulsive or just terrible.
Have you seen, maybe you've noticed this too, but I've seen less extensive conversation
Oh, yes.
on these shows. And I think that's due to the social networks and, the 140 character limit and trying to, get that verbal smackdown in.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that shuts down discussion.
Totally. Well, there's some shows I find that people will sort of talk about sort of more in detail. Like, for example, Young Justice, which we'll talk about later.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I find that those are probably the most in-depth conversations I've seen fan-wise in a long time. But when it comes to something like JLA Action, which is an awesome show, people will just sort of spout out, it's funny, it's great, I love it, and then that's it. But when it comes to, even like Teen Titans Go, it's just short, little pithy 140 character comments and you're done.
Yeah, I gotta confess, on stuff like that, it's like, what exactly do you say about a gag where Robin is cosplaying Steve Jobs? I mean, maybe somebody has the answer to that, but I sure as hell don't.
But it's so awesome.
Yeah, but it's just like, wow, Robin Steve Jobs, that's really weird. But how do you break it down?
Yeah, there's not much else you can say about it.
Some of it's got to be the format. I mean, there's got to be possibly, it depends on what you're talking about in the show. It's like if you're a fan of the actual animation of the show, perhaps you can talk about the craft of putting it together there.
Yeah.
But, so far as being able to have long, exciting, yet also drawn out discussions on plot, it's going to have to be a drama, I think.
Agreed. Yeah.
I think comedy is something people tend to sense intuitively. I think it's hard to explain, but you know it. If something is funny, you know it when you see it immediately.
Certainly.
And I think that's inherently harder to express than the nuances of, clear-cut plotting in a show like Young Justice.
Yeah. Well, I find that even with the DC DTV movies, the conversation, like when the line first started back in 2007, like we would have conversations that went on for 500 pages, like 1,000 posts. And now, like we do get some like the odd, really in-depth discussion. I think the last really layered discussion thread we've had on the forum was probably for the Flashpoint paradox.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, it's been a lot of like, this is inspired by the New 52, ergo it sucks, and it's definitely dipped down. And I guess it really does sort of depend on like the drama and maybe just sort of
Also the execution.
I guess. Oh, true. Yeah, the execution has been a bit, I guess, iffy from time to time. Well, actually, Batman: The Killing Joke, that was a pretty long discussion thread.
Oh yeah.
Well, then again, I think that one deserved a lot of conversations, like a long conversation, considering the source material and how like super iffy that movie was.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of things that it just didn't need.
Oh, I know, right?
That could have been about half as long and it would have been okay.
Yep.
Man, that's like a 4-hour podcast right there.
That was a 40-minute movie, and they made it more. And anyway, I could go on about that for a while.
But just to touch on like one thing, because I just got it. I remember when Batman Beyond was going, people were always iffy about the Barbara and Bruce Wayne thing.
Oh yeah.
I never had a huge issue with it, but I remember when I was watching The Killing Joke and I was watching like the Now.
It felt icky.
Yeah, like that's when I realized that's the problem with it. It just sort of, that movie brought together all the problems with that little, like a subplot from the old Batman Beyond series. It just laid it all out, and I was like, yeah, that doesn't work at all.
Well, the problem with that was, in and of itself, I mean, okay, you've got an older person, a younger person. It's unusual. In some context, it works out.
Yeah, and, generally speaking, there's nothing wrong with that,
Yeah.
but somehow within the context of Batman and him actually being a father figure to her.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then in the Killing Joke context, they had this whole thing where, it's done, and then Bruce wants to forget about it, and Barbara's on the phone going, it's not like it meant anything, no. And
I know, it's handled just so...
nobody came off looking good. It diminished everybody
No.
involved. It was not good.
It felt very clumsy.
Yes, thank you.
It was certainly heavy and dark, but to me, that's a case of getting heavy and dark for the sake of getting heavy and dark.
Exactly.
And nothing annoys me like that. I am not one of these people that loves Frank Miller style work. I think it's a collective drag, and to the extent animation gets drawn in, it's not for the better. Anyway.
I was trying to come up with like a really good comment for that, and I just sort of paused. I couldn't think of something because I do agree. Like Frank Miller has a lot of pull for someone who shouldn't have a lot of pull, and I don't know, maybe year one and The Dark Knight came at just the right time for him in terms of like comics for them to really take off.
I should amend that. Year one, at least in animated format, that was actually quite compelling, I thought.
I thought it was quite good too. Yeah.
And I liked the comic telling of it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't think that Frank Miller's later work stands up against his earlier work. His art style just sort of fell off. It wasn't as consistent. Yes. Much love to him, but it looked sloppy.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Well, I mean, so far as DC's DTVs go, I have not liked a lot of them. They've all felt very stiff and soulless. And I realize that they do have their fans. I just sort of dropped off after, Justice League Unlimited. Somewhere around that time, it's like I would watch stuff every now and then. I watched some of Brave and the Bold, and I did love the original Teen Titans. And, just somewhere after that, I totally dropped off. And I would catch some of these DTVs every now and then. They would be technically fine, and they seem to be, good retellings of the original source material, but they just did not grip me at all.
Interesting. Like, I found for the most part, I'm not really sure the right way to put this. I've been told I'm very forgiving when it comes to these movies, and I can kind of get that. I do enjoy sometimes the attempt at what they try to do with these to really sort of bring these classic comics to a bigger audience, given like how small the readership is for comics nowadays, as opposed to these movies, and eventually when they re-air on Netflix and TV and stuff, it's a huge audience. But I find that sometimes when they condense these really massive epics into a small 75-minute movie and they cut it down to the bare essentials, they really cut out like the core of sort of like the themes of like the original story, and things do kind of seem pretty robotic and on they just sort of seem to be going on like autopilot for the most part.
Well, perhaps that is some of it, because I suppose, for example, one of the more recent ones that I've seen, I saw the Judas Contract.
Yes.
I love the original source material. I thought it was a great story arc. I could read it 1,000 times over and I would probably still enjoy it every time. I did not like the DTV.
Huh. Did you find it was too like simplified, or just it sort of lacked the heart of the original story?
Well, I suppose that's it. It lacked the heart. That's actually one of the reasons why, when we get to talking about Batman and Harley Quinn, that I really like that, because it did at least have heart or a soul. Didn't the Teen Titans cartoon series on Cartoon Network, didn't that do the Judas Contract as well? And wasn't it really good? I remember them doing a really good job with the Judas Contract storyline on that series.
They did.
They certainly had the storyline with Tara betraying the team and the fallout from that.
I think they did a better job of building up to her betrayal, because they made you like her.
Yep.
Well, that's one of the big issues with the movie itself. There's no time to learn who these characters are, especially Tara. We're just sort of told to, accept Tara, this new member. She's a bit rough. And yet one of the weird things about that movie that actually really bugged me is that she's been with the Titans for a year, and yet she's still acting like she's just meeting the Titans for the first time. Like there's a few odd scenes in the Judas Contract movie where she's like, oh, that's Raven. I heard she talks to a demon. She's been there for a year. She should know that. But with the show itself, they gave Tara a few episodes, I think maybe 3 or 4, to really kind of work her way into the team dynamic before sort of the Judas stuff kicked in.
That was more than okay.
And, the show skewed a bit younger, so they couldn't, of course, do everything with that comic.
I think a trap a lot of the shared universe direct-to-video films fall into. By that I mean just everything connected to Batman, and it was called Son of Batman, and the whole Justice League War thing. All that's pretty much related to each other. And something they seem to get into is they've got their core story, and they've got a few attempts at developing other people and things on the side, but it never gets deep enough to resonate. And so it all just kind of happens.
Yeah, it doesn't resonate with me. It doesn't connect with me on that level.
Yeah, there's like just enough on the surface to sort of make you sort of feel that they're sort of adding something outside of the core theme. But usually when I watch these movies for the first time, I'm really super into it. I'm a huge, massive DC head, and I love a lot of their stuff. I find that I'll be like, oh well, they try to do that, good for them. But then as I sort of go back to rewatch a lot of these, I'm just like, wow, like they really don't do much outside of trying to get the bare bones across. And like, granted, they'll give like Cyborg like a 30-second side plot, but that's just not enough.
Mm-hmm.
Andrei, do you have anything to add?
I don't know about movies in general.
Let's say about the existing DC direct-to-video movies. What are your thoughts on them?
Well, the current continuity with the new 52 is fine. I don't know. They're slowly trying to build it up more, introduce more characters, more teams, and so on. The Judas Contracts, for example, I thought it was a good movie. Different from the comic, but I thought it worked.
Oh, so you thought it worked?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Within this context, I thought it was fine. The one thing I didn't care much was there was no real build-up to Terra's betrayal. But otherwise, I liked it. The Judas Contracts, probably the most recent one, I liked more than the others. Before this was Batman Bad Blood was the last one before Judas Contract I really enjoyed, which was 2 years ago, I think, or last year, I don't remember. And before the shared continuity, I don't know, I enjoyed lots of them.
Andrei, I got like a bit of a two-part question for you, if you don't mind. Do you have you been reading like comics growing up as a kid, like the stories that these are based on? Have you read the originals that these movies are based on?
I do some research for some movies.
Okay.
Either tracking down the comic or just reading online the plot, the characters featured, stuff like that.
Well, I just kind of wanted to get your opinion on sort of what you think about the continuity that the movies are forming, like that started with Justice League War, and save for the odd movie that came out per year, it seems like they're building a bigger world with the likes of Justice League War, Thrones of Atlantis, the 3 Batman ones. Like, do you have any thoughts on the continuity they're trying to create with those movies, and like should they keep going with that? Because it seems like as DC Comics is moving away from the whole New 52 thing, should this line maybe push that aside as well and just maybe attempt to do more movies like Assault on Arkham or Batman and Harley?
I'm fine if they continue this shared continuity. I don't know, maybe one movie per year for the continuity instead of the standalone movies. I think next year we'll have something like this. But I don't know, I see they're trying to build the world more, introduce more characters.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I haven't followed the New 52 comics that closely.
You're not missing much.
I know there are some differences in the movies, but they're not so bad. Yeah, I'd be fine if they continue or make some references to past events from these movies.
Very cool, very cool. Because it seems like with these movies, it's almost like they're trying to establish like an alternate animated series. Like we haven't had a really serious DC cartoon since Beware the Batman, which is totally underrated, I think. And it seems like it's a great show, but it seems like with these DC DTVs, like certain titles, again, Justice League War and all of that, it's almost as if they're getting their shot at doing like an ongoing DC cartoon series just in DTV form.
Yeah, it's like a multiple part episode from a TV show.
Yeah.
Like a story arc or something.
Yeah.
See, that's an interesting way to look at it. From my angle, by those standards, it's actually a little bit deficient in that while there's character and acting continuity, it almost seems like the various projects almost go out of their way to not reference each other. Like, just for an example, the classic DC animated universe everybody loves. You could go into Justice League, and it would have some references to stuff that happened in Superman or something. Look at, say, Justice League Throne of Atlantis. They've got a stinger where Orm is visited in prison by, I think, Lex Luthor. It makes you think it's setting up the next thing.
And we get nothing.
Nothing comes of it, right?
Yeah.
The closest they ever got to continuity was I feel the whole Batman line.
Agreed.
And that was decent, but if the goal was to make it feel like the various Justice League movies were chapters 1, 2, 3, and so on, I think they most decisively have not done it.
It doesn't really help anything, but I think there's a time skip between each movie around a few months or so. So maybe something happened that they were alluding to, but we missed it. It doesn't help, but it's possible.
I'd love to see original stories, and style seems to have it all kind of looks samey. And what I'd like to do is see sort of like you remember a show on Cartoon Network, Flapjack, how they would allow their artists to, it would still be on model, but they would have sort of their own flair.
Yeah.
And, their own sort of interpretation of Flapjack.
I think we might get that with Phil Barassa back on Young Justice.
Yeah.
I'm starting to think that since he'll be super busy there, he's been sort of the regular go-to guy for the DC DTV line for quite a while now. And it seems like Gotham by Gaslight, they have someone new. It might be John Suzuki, I want to say his name is.
I think that's about right.
But it looks like they got a little bit of a different style there. And I am really curious as to who they'll get to do for the two-part Death of Superman movie. I assume that they'll probably stick with the Phil Barassa design for the Suicide Squad Hell to Pay DTV. Mm-hmm. But it seems like maybe we're going to get that chance to see a bit more variety in design. As I was watching Batman and Harley, like granted the animation isn't the best in it, but it was kind of refreshing to see the Bruce Timm quote-unquote style again. It was pretty refreshing, actually.
Yeah, it was nice. It felt very familiar.
Yes.
My boyfriend and I had gone to see it in the theater during, I think, that one night they were showing it. And, you just start watching it, and it feels like that part of Beware the Grey Ghost where little Bruce Wayne is sitting there in his hat and everything, and the projector's going off in the background, and he's just got this huge smile on his face. That's kind of what it felt like going in there. And just seeing that high scene with Woodrue and Poison Ivy.
Oh, that was actually pretty swell, yeah. I gotta agree.
In fact, I think the animation was probably tightest in that scene there.
I found the animation in that scene and the little scuffle between Nightwing and Harley in the alleyway, I thought those were actually done pretty well.
Yeah, it actually kind of fell off towards the end. That's where it got...
Yeah.
It felt like that issue of that holiday special issue. I forget the name of it. You probably remember it.
Oh, the holiday special.
Yeah, where they're going on the shopping spree, Harley and Ivy.
Yes, it was by Ronnie Del Carmen, I think.
It kind of felt like it started going off in that direction towards the end.
Huh. Well, I wonder who storyboarded that sequence, because that could have been a factor.
And I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm okay with things sort of going off the rails.
No, yeah.
It just gave it a more organic feel for something that was clearly felt very digitally animated.
I know, right?
You are listening to the Toonzone Podcast. We'll be right back after this quick music break. In Batman and Harley Quinn, Jason Woodrue and Poison Ivy are trying to recreate the chemical concoction that turned Poison Ivy into a plant person. They don't want to reverse engineer it because that would take way too much time, so they're trying to take a shortcut by stealing a whole mess of stuff, including scientists. Yeah, obviously, Batman's on the case, and so is Nightwing, and they decide to try and recruit some of her known acquaintances, which would include Harley Quinn. Jim, you want to take it from there?
Oh, yeah, and then it just sort of becomes almost a slapstick road trip. We get this really great scene in the bar, for example, where we get a lot of cameos from some of the best henchmen in Batman history, I think. And it just becomes this sort of goofy trip where Batman and Harley Quinn are their opposing identities kind of face off. Harley Quinn, she's kind of struggling to burst out sort of as her own person. She's no longer Joker's, sidekick. She's trying to become her own person. And I actually found that they did a little bit of a good job with it, except that message got a little bit muddled in some of the fan servicey parts.
Yeah, there was a lot of male gaze stuff going on, and you only get away with that because it's Harley Quinn.
Exactly. It's just that there's that one, like there's the now sort of, I guess, infamous, you would call it, the Nightwing and Harley Quinn scene where, she starts off, she's really upset because, she's trying to go legit straight. She's applied to all these different places to be a doctor, and they've turned her down. And she's like, I'm trying to be my own person. I'm trying to make it on my own smarts. And then she's like, about two scenes later, she's like bent over in front of Nightwing. It's just this weird juxtaposition that I found kind of kills Harley's drive in the movie to be her own person. It's a big clash, I found. I found that it just didn't mesh 100%.
Well, there were a lot of things about this film that were very, very awkward. The pacing is is so weird.
Yes.
There's a lot of times where even though there's action going on, it just feels very slow, like where she's just chasing that guy down the road.
Agreed. Which I still can't wrap my head around the point of that scene.
Well, there's so many things that are not really, they don't have a point, but they're enjoyable anyway.
Yeah.
So Harley tells Batman to stop the Batmobile right now, and she leaps out and she goes on this citywide chase of this guy. And what had happened with the guy? Was he someone that she had dated in the past or something like that?
He dumped her at the prom or something a few years earlier. I don't remember how many years because it's been a few, I presume.
Oh, okay. So you see, it's funny. It just went on way too long.
Yes. I don't. Were they trying to pad the time?
Well, I guess they had to get it to movie length.
But then it felt rushed toward the end. They should have saved more time for that.
And then the scene in the middle of the movie where they go to the boonies to that henchman dive.
Yeah. 2 songs, man. 2 songs.
It didn't need the 2 songs.
No.
And, as much as I enjoy Harley singing Hanging on the Telephone, it didn't need to be the whole song. It was the whole song, right?
It was.
Okay.
It was like 3 minutes long.
Yeah, I mean, I love Blondie. I could listen to Blondie all day. But just so far as pacing within the movie, her performance was awesome, but it killed the pacing.
Agreed. I found that my favorite joke of the entire movie was the after credit scene. I don't know why. I love it so much. I assume you guys have seen it. It's like the little sort of Ask Dr. Harley, that little 3-minute blurb at the end.
Oh, yeah, the game show?
Yeah, I don't know why, but I loved it just because I see it as like a legit sort of inevitability as how the world's going. I can kind of see that happening. It's just, that's probably my favorite gag of the whole movie. And for some reason, I got a huge laugh out of Catwoman's henchman giving Batman a glass of milk.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I mean, maybe this would have worked better if it was a series of short stories that they were telling.
Oh, that would have worked, yeah.
This way they could get to the punchline, because I feel like this was about punchlines. And if they had, a finite part of the movie to work with, they could have had more control of the pacing.
Yeah, it seems like after all the relatively serious DC movies, they just wanted to take this one and completely go to town and be silly, and this was Tim essentially doing whatever he wanted. And on one level, that's good and experimental and all of that. On another level, maybe this thing needed somebody to kind of reel him in just a little bit.
I think so.
I can see that, yeah. But, you're not watching Batman and Harley Quinn for the cohesive plot.
I will say it's a really stark contrast from the last movie he did, Gods and Monsters. It's sort of bizarre, he has this really dark, serious take on the Justice League, and then he follows it up. Well, if we remove the Killing Joke, but he follows it up with Batman and Harley. It's interesting because I found Gods and Monsters to be a really tight, really excellent animated movie. I super dug it. I'm a big fan of alternate takes and what ifs and Elseworlds, and this was right up my alley. But I think you nailed it where, Tim was allowed to sort of run wild, and maybe someone should have, maybe slapped his hand once or twice.
Or just, maybe cut out the Nightwing chain to the bed thing.
Maybe.
And that's what's kind of disorienting about Batman and Harley. In one sense, it's these characters that fans know, but it's also kind of not them.
Oh, true, right?
Yeah.
It's like what if this were Bizarre World Batman the animated series? Like if Batmite came over, snapped his fingers, and everything went screwy for a little while. Incidentally, folks, it's probably futile to try to fit this into continuity. This was their playground. Don't worry about it.
I thought that this was set in the same continuity as Superman Brainiac Attacks.
That would work. Holy smokes, that works perfectly.
Sure.
But would you guys recommend that people check it out? Like, I find that it's a worthwhile watch. It's fun. It depends, I think, on sort of how far you're willing to let sort of this movie go. It's a silly take. Like, how do you mind if you're Batman silly? I find that people can sometimes take these characters in these movies and these shows far too seriously that they forget to have a bit of fun sometimes, and it seems like that kind of happened based on some of the comments I've seen. Some people have taken this movie insanely seriously, when this movie was never meant to be a serious inclusion in the line. It was just a fun one-off, and I think...
And that's fine.
Yeah, exactly. It's fine. Not everything has to be this serious melodrama, and I think personally I would recommend that people check it out. It's not perfect by any means. Again, the pacing has some problems. The message gets a bit muddled, but the the goofy plot by Woodrow and Poison Ivy. For some reason, I found it hilarious. The after credit stinger for me is like worth sitting through the previous 65 minutes. It's got some definite pros and a few cons, yeah, but it's got some pros.
My merciless answer would be I love Happy Batman, and if I want Happy Batman, I could go to Brave and the Bold.
I would love to see a Brave and the Bold animated movie.
Right.
But I would also argue that the Batman the Animated Series Batman has had different interpretations, maybe not so much in, well, sometimes in the animated series, but also in the comics where you do get these silly sort of stories. So I think it's within keeping in the, Batman TAS universe.
Agreed. Come on, man. Batman smiles more than a few times in the cartoon. Come on.
That is true, actually. That was actually something I liked about Batman the Animated Series. Speaking of, everybody kind of remembers how moody it could be and how serious it could be, but also Bruce Wayne is actually a very human person in it.
Yep.
Even later on in Justice League and all that, he's sort of perpetually in, I'm Batman, I'm awesome, I will show you my awesome things. But in the animated series, he'll make jokes to Alfred, or the Joker will be, in danger of plunging to doom, and he'll say, "You're going to help me, aren't you?" And Batman will not answer right away. He'll let him stew for a little bit, and he'll find humor in letting the Joker worry about it. And I like that. I like that kind of personality.
Me too. I found that as the series went on, well, once Bruce Wayne sort of was shuffled off to the background, I think we lost a big sort of part of the charm to Batman the Animated Series. They kind of kept it a bit in the new Batman Adventures. Like, they still brought in Bruce from time to time, but it was never enough. I really liked how Batman the Animated Series gave equal time to both masks, I guess.
Yeah, once you got to Justice League Unlimited, it was pretty strictly straight up superhero stuff.
Yeah.
And that's a shame, because it was great to see this more human part of Batman.
Yep. Well, one of my favorite moments from Justice League was when we get to see Alfred again. That instantly humanizes Batman in Justice League. Like, you instantly remember, oh yeah, he's Bruce Wayne as well. He's not just, super awesome Batman 24/7.
Mm-hmm. Love
me my Alfred.
So how did you start watching Batman the Animated Series?
Oh, geez, I can remember it almost perfectly. I grew up on a farm, and chore time was at 5 o'clock. And before chore time on some days, we would have to run out to a nearby town to pick up, like, cow supplies and stuff. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, whatever reason, Dad was running late that day, and I went out with him for a supply run, and I had my little small dinky, like, digital watch on, and I was like, "Come on, Dad, we have to get going. It's almost 5 o'clock." And I remember Dad pulls in. The car is not even turned off yet. I race to the living room. I jump over the couch, and I have just enough time to click record on the VCR and see the big blimps come up on the screen for the first time. It was, I remember that just as clear as day. The first episode I watched was On Leather Wings. No, it was Heart of Ice.
Oh, nice.
Oh, wow. That's some first episode.
That's a really good intro.
I missed the Saturday Cat in the Claw Part 1 and the On Leather Wings Sunday night premiere, but I caught the Monday one, and, like, I was a Batman fan even before that, but this was just the perfect start to the show. I don't think then I realized what I was sort of watching at that time. I had no idea that, like, Mr. Freeze was this joke villain from beforehand. Like, I knew of him from the comics I read here and there as a kid, but as I sort of got more into the comics as the show went along, like, Batman the Animated Series really opened up my, I guess, exploration of the world of graphic novels and comics and stuff. But yeah, I guess, like, at the time I had no idea just how heavy and how monumental, I guess, that show was.
Yeah, I think over here they had done a 2-part airing of The Cat in the Claw. Mm-hmm. And I was over at my father's at the time. I went and recorded it on the VCR while I was watching it. I'm still not entirely sure my father understood why I rewatched it like 5 times immediately after it aired.
I would do the exact same thing.
Oh, it was just so awesome. I mean, the animation was fantastic. Yeah. The music had me from the start. Just their use of color and this Art Deco style, but also with the slightly modern, amenities like the phones and stuff like that.
I love that. How TVs were in black and white, how Batman has this big, epic high-tech computer, but the screen's in black and white. Yeah. It was those really neat little touches that I found to be really, really interesting.
Which kind of fell off as the series went on. They went and modernized the designs of, like, your characters, their thugs in the street and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, while the animation certainly got a lot tighter over time, I thought it lost a little bit of its charm in that.
No, I agree. Things look too slick. Lines were too straight. It just sort of, it made things a little bit more colder than perhaps it should have been. I found that, like, the difference between Batman the Animated Series and the new Batman Adventures, like, going back, like, I tend to rewatch the show quite a bit, you know. I find that it makes my gym time go by super fast when I watch these old shows as I'm on the bike or the elliptical. And, like, as I watch, like, a Batman the Animated Series episode and the new Batman Adventures episode, I feel that there's more weight and tangibility to the characters, the designs, the looks in a Batman the Animated Series episode as opposed to the new Batman Adventures where things just seem like they were going for more efficiency and not character.
But I do think it still held up.
It has.
The World's Finest was still pretty awesome. I mean, so far as, you know, DTVs go, that was pretty gripping, I thought.
I found that the animation in that three-parter was just spectacular. That was TMS, I think, yeah, and they had this really great way of making things sort of flourish a bit more, like characters would bend a bit more, they would exaggerate a bit more. I think that really helped offset the more stiff designs.
What was your favorite episode of Batman the Animated Series?
Oh, jeez. I have a soft spot for Robin's Reckoning Part 1. I know everyone hates it, but I think The Forgotten, I don't know why, but I really like The Forgotten. It's a terrible episode, but I don't know why, but I love it so much.
I could use a little help on this. What's The Forgotten?
Isn't that the one with the abandoned, the little orphans in the sewer?
No, that's the Sewer King. The Forgotten isn't the one with when he's taken hostage with amnesia.
Oh, jeez, that's right. That's the Underdwellers. Yes. And has the Sewer King and with the alligators?
You're right. Yes.
Oh, wow.
Thanks for the catch on that.
Big faux pas. Yeah, good work, man.
Well, can I just say that I like the cute kids, and people who don't are filthy heathens.
Jeez, there's one more that I'm blanking on. It's the one with Rupert Thorne's brother, the priest. I'm trying to think of the name right now.
Oh yeah, with his son in the hospital, and I don't remember everything.
Yes!
It was more dramatic.
I think that episode was when I realized just how like heavy the show is, because you have Batman trying to bring these two brothers together to stop a mob war. One's a priest, one's a big-time hood. That's like some pretty heavy stuff.
Even as a kid, I thought it was
pretty heavy, right?
Well, for the original 65 episodes, didn't they kind of have free reign in doing that for the most part? Just because, you know, you had the Batman movie had come out and, you know, they greenlit this and they said just go ahead and make 65 episodes, and then they did, and that's probably after that is when other factors came into play, like corporate coming in and maybe taking a little control too.
Yeah.
That's more or less right. I think another factor, and this was something that this great interview in back issue 99 was touching on. At the time, Fox Network itself was quite new, and they were looking to make a mark on it, and so Fox was pretty open to giving them the leeway that let them do something special.
And they did. We got some really good stories out of it.
Agreed. But even when they had to change it to the Adventures of Batman and Robin, it still sort of kept, I think, the original intent of the show a bit lighter, yeah, but it still sort of managed to give us some really good ones as well.
All right, so let's see. Let's pick out an episode at random, and Jim,
Yes.
you're going to let me know what you think of it.
Okay.
Moon of the Wolf.
Awful. Flat out awful in every respect.
Flat out awful. Okay. So, while we're here, I should mention that there is a game out there, a tabletop game of Almost Got 'Em.
Oh, wow.
Yes, I know. I've been wanting to hunt that down and pick it up. I've heard great reviews from about it.
Yeah, I want to pick it up. I haven't gotten to play it with a group of people yet, but that is going to happen. So in Almost Got 'Em is basically Batman's rogues gallery sitting around the table talking about how they almost took down Batman, and secretly Batman is actually disguised as one of them.
It's a great reveal too, that scene.
Oh, yeah, it's fantastic. And, you know, obviously you don't know who it is until the end of the episode. And the tabletop game mimics this idea. So you're supposed to figure out who Batman is by the end of the game.
Oh, wow.
That's excellent.
That is very cool. All right, I'm going to throw a random one at you as well to see what you think of it. How about POV?
POV would be the episode where Bullock and two other cops have differing accounts of how a bust on a crime
Drug bust?
went wrong, and they've got to sort that out because the result of that incident has Batman caught by the mob.
I remember liking that episode. I don't remember too much about it beyond that.
All right, let's try a different one then. I'll try.
Which one is the episode with the robot clown?
Oh, the Robot Clown? I believe that's...
The Last Laugh.
Oh, The Last Laugh, yeah.
Yeah, that episode I've never been a fan of.
Is that the one where he says, time for some bat magic? No, that's Be a Clown, yeah. Because that was a terrible line, but it works. Todd disapproves.
Todd disapproves of it. I think mainly in that episode, it might have actually been the soundtrack that sort of threw me off. It was different than the rest of it. It was trying to go for a little more, I suppose, a little more of a hip hop sound to it, and it just was not working.
Oh, geez, that's right.
But
That was awful.
the robot clown, whose name I forget,
Captain Clown.
Captain Clown, he did show up in Batman and Harley.
Captain Clown.
Are you serious? Captain Clown?
He did.
Yeah. The Joker even says you killed Captain Clown.
Totally does. Yeah, in the bar scene.
That was really his name?
That was. Remember, Joker's like, you've killed Captain Clown.
I love you, comics.
What about Tiger? People always sort of touch and go on that. Some find it too melodramatic and sort of, I guess, just too much drama.
I remember liking Tiger. I mean, there's a handful of episodes that were just flat out bad, but if you were to ask me to remember which ones they were, I've blocked them from memory.
I think Tiger is good in a kind of pulpy way. It's got the whole crazy science mutated these people into animal people, and
Dr. Moreau kind of stuff, yeah.
isn't that nuts? And
Yeah.
I'm not in love with that kind of thing, but I got what they were going for. The werewolf's isolation, the tragedy of that, I thought was communicated successfully.
All right, let's keep with the animal theme. And what about the Terrible Trio?
I think that's the one where free rich people decide to be criminals.
Yeah, just for kicks.
Oh yeah, the fox, the vulture, and the shark.
It's also kind of bad.
That did not stick with me at all.
Yeah, there's probably a reason for that.
Wow. Well, I guess that's my opinion of it.
When you think of threats to Batman, three rich people who have never had to work a day in their life, it's probably not high on your list.
True.
Between Harley Quinn and Harley's Holiday, which is your favorite?
Harley Quinn, it's so fun.
I'm going to go yes on that and agree with you. I love both of them, but Harley Quinn was just fantastic.
Todd, what about you? Between those two, you too, Andrei.
Yeah, Harley Quinn is my choice as well. Both are good, but I don't know. There's something about Harley Quinn that, I don't know, I just enjoyed it more, which kind of makes the Batman and Harley Quinn movie a little more disappointing because it's basically the same concept. But they're both good.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Although my favorite Harley episode is probably the holiday one.
The big tank at the end, come on.
Because that's the one thing where she's trying to be good and things just don't conspire to work in her favor.
Yeah, Harley's Holiday, yeah.
And Batman is actually nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
In many episodes, it's criminal scum. I'll get you. But with Harley, he gets it.
Which is quite different than where they went in Batman and Harley Quinn. Because he was kind of a jerk the whole time.
He was.
Yeah. It's like, oh God, Harley. Why?
He is very put upon there. How about some of the DTVs they did based on Batman the Animated Series, and also the movie releases, which obviously would include Mask of the Phantasm?
Well, I gotta say, we were talking about improved animation for the world's finest. I was looking at Sub-Zero just last night, and oh my God, I don't know who they got to do that, but that's some real polish. I was very impressed.
Didn't they have a new voice for Batgirl in Sub-Zero?
Oh, yes. I think she was just a one-off. Let me look that up quickly.
No, I think it was her original voice before Tara Strong took over. Melissa something, I don't remember.
I'm going to have to correct you there, Andrei.
Oh,
For Sub-Zero, it was Mary Kay Bergman.
sorry about that.
Yeah.
But I'm going to look up the voice actress for Batman the Animated Series, because I'm pretty sure it was someone who was on Little House on the Prairie.
Yes, Melissa Gilbert.
Yes, that's it.
I grew up on a farm. I watched that show.
I think we all watched that show.
So here's a competition, Night of the Ninja or Day of the Samurai.
Oh, that's a tough one.
And let's also talk about the fact that in these two episodes, the title refers to Kyodai Ken as both a ninja and a samurai. Which is he? The world may never know.
You know, I would have to probably give it to Day of the Samurai, but I do get a bit of a guilty pleasure at Night of the Ninja. I find that even though the animation is really rubbery and really odd in that episode, it sort of works for it in some way.
Yeah, what I liked about Day of the Samurai is the fight over the Death Touch, the killer move of Doom.
Oh, yes.
And also, they got the showdown at the volcano. And in that respect, it has something in common with the Demon's Quest, which is... That was a two-parter with Ra's al Ghul, and they have the whole personal showdown, and it's all treated very seriously. It's no nonsense, just Batman in a pure physical confrontation with a not good person. To me, those two fights were the pinnacle of that.
I think a big appeal for Night of the Ninja for me was, I guess both episodes do it, but we do get a nice little look into Bruce Wayne's past for the first time, and I guess not the first time, but it's one of the few glimpses we get in the entire series, and you got Robin sort of playing a good role in it as well, not just helpless boy wonder off to the side. And I do really enjoy that scene at the end, the fight between them, where once Summer Gleason is sort of out of the picture, Bruce Wayne goes from foppish rich boy to like kick-ass Batman.
Why don't we talk about Mask of the Phantasm? What do you think made Mask of the Phantasm great?
Jeez, where to begin? I actually don't really know where to begin. It just sort of hits the marks in nearly every regard,
Did you see it in the theater?
I unfortunately didn't. I super wish I did. It came to our theater for about a week, and then it was gone, and that was it. And then next fall, I had a nice little fancy VHS in my pocket, in my hands of the movie, which I think I ran down pretty fast.
Have you ever gotten to see it in the theater?
No, that's, I really wish I would have loved to have gotten the chance to see that in the theater. I was kind of hoping that for the Blu-ray re-release, that Phantom Events would have maybe put it back out for a night.
Sometimes some of these theaters will do that sort of thing. Like I know that, I don't know what if you have an equivalent, but like the Alamo Drafthouse, they did a showing over there. So if you have like these smaller chains like that show these smaller movies, then there's a chance that you will get to see it. And if you can, I definitely do recommend seeing it in the theater. I think it'll add just another layer of depth to your experience with that film.
Very cool. I'm really hoping I'll get the chance to at some point. I like to think that there would be a possibility that maybe since Batman the Animated Series is with Batman and Harley and everything, it seems like it's sort of pushing itself back out into the front a little bit. All the toys, all the comics, and everything. I would like to think that maybe there'd be a chance that Fathom would give a go at it.
Mask of the Phantasm was originally supposed to be a direct-to-video film. Basically, at the last second, they went and decided to release it to theaters. So there wasn't...
Yep.
I mean, I remember seeing some advertising for it. I still have somewhere in an old container a page I ripped out of a magazine that was a full-page ad for Mask of the Phantasm, because I just sort of did that thing at the time. And so they did do some marketing for it, but they didn't do like a lot of marketing for it. So I don't think a lot of people knew that it was out there. And enough people know at this point, I'm sure, that Siskel and Ebert had not seen Mask of the Phantasm in the theaters, but later on saw it when it was released to video. And they regretted not seeing it in the theaters.
Do you think that might have helped with the box office in any way? I guess they probably had more cachet at the time.
If they both thought that the film was good, I do think it would have like a little bit of a bump. Certainly to have two film critics that had that much reach endorse it as a work of art that speaks to its quality, I think. And the animation was awesome.
Cool, agreed.
Obviously it was more violent than you would see in the actual animated series.
But it wasn't excessive.
No, it wasn't excessive. It felt right for the story that they were going for. It is a dark and an emotional story.
Yep.
Jim, you could probably sum it up better than I. What happens in Mask of the Phantasm?
Well, basically, we have there's this new mysterious kind of vigilante knocking off mobsters in Gotham. Batman, of course, gets the blame, and at the same time, a love interest from Bruce's past has shuffled her way back into his life, and it all kind of comes together as we sort of learn about this Batman's lost love and how basically they're just doomed from the get-go. There's just so much to it. In terms of like Mask of the Phantasm, what I find is that it works on a lot of really cool ways. It's an awesome revenge story. It's a really good mystery. It's a really good romance. It just has so much kind of going for it. And I find that it's one of those few movies that as you rewatch it, once you learn all the nooks and crannies of the movie, you sort of appreciate it more, like how it sets up the mystery, how it sets up the misdirect, and just how it really brings in the Joker, who I guess to anyone would seem like...
It kind of gives you a Joker origin without going into the Joker's origin.
Yes! It gives you that taste, and it doesn't for once seem excessive or just sort of like, let's throw the Joker in just to put his name on the poster. They actually work him in really smoothly, and as I rewatched that as like an older person, you just kind of got to really appreciate how smooth they were with that, with doing that. And what blows my mind is how at one point Warner Brothers was really... They wanted them to re-edit the movie so it all unraveled in chronological order based on the events in the movie.
Oh, that would not have been a great idea.
Oh, God.
I know, right? And it boggles the mind that they almost did that to this movie when how the movie is set up right now, like how they sort of brought it together. It's done in such these little perfect little moments where you see like a lot of cause and effect. Everything sort of supports the next scene. The flashback supports what comes next, and as you learn more about that scene, it just sort of forms this really great puzzle, I guess. Like,
Ultimately, I'm glad that they trusted their audience to be able to put a story together.
Yeah.
I know it boggles the mind that they would think that people would be too like dumb to.
Well, I think because generally it's considered a children's property, that sometimes people don't give children the credit that they deserve in being able to put these things together, and they want to spell it out for them.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the animated series set that standard after, a period in the 80s where a lot of tunes weren't even reaching for it. And so when you're doing a theatrical product, I mean, my God, if you're not at least meeting that standard, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, bullet dodged. Absolutely.
And one of the other things I did love about Mask of the Phantasm was that look into Bruce's past.
Totally.
Because again, it's, a look at Bruce Wayne, the civilian. And as a young adult, dealing with the death of his family and trying to figure out how he's going to translate all that pain, how he's going to forge all that pain into something he can use to better Gotham.
Yeah, that's my favorite scene in the movie, I think.
That graveyard scene, especially when he's trying to bargain with his parents. Jeez.
Yes.
Yeah, I like the bargaining scene. It's just. It's probably one of my all-time favorite moments in the series itself, the movie, and how they follow it up. Once we find out what happens between Batman and the love of his past, the scene in the Batcave, the reaction on Alfred's face. It's just we get these really cool glimpses into what could have been and what inevitably happens, and it's a really neat exploration that we don't really get, I find, in cartoons at all, really, and maybe even like the comics as well. I can't think of a really impactful moment from the Batman comics that equal that graveyard scene.
Well, it's a really great character building moment.
Yeah.
And I think that you can't just connect with Batman as Batman. You have to connect with Batman as Bruce Wayne, and that effectively does that.
Agreed. It sort of presents him in a fashion that you have never seen him before, but it's also really relatable. Not I guess relatable is a...
Yeah, I mean, really, the entire movie plays like tragedy, really.
Yeah.
Because both for Andrei and Bruce's story, through the fault of neither one, circumstances pretty much pushed them into outcomes they weren't looking for. And I think, like you were touching on earlier, more than anything else, perhaps, Phantasm really delved into psychology.
Yep.
Like Bruce's whole guilt thing, his quest for meaning and belonging. The Joker is sheer menace in the film.
Yeah.
And even in the flashbacks, you can tell he's pretty unstable. And in the story of the doomed mobster who tries to go to the Joker for protection and he gets killed off. I mean, that whole...
Sal Valestra.
Yeah, that whole meeting with the Joker, he's acting like a fool, but in the subtext, you can tell if you're underestimating this guy, you're going to get in big trouble.
The Joker is very, very dangerous.
Well, there's that moment when he smiles and when the Joker's saying, "Oh, that's what I like to see, a nice big smile."
Yep.
And you're just like, yeah, he's done.
Yep.
He's done. And it's great. We see this really good contrast between Andrea and Bruce Wayne at one point. One of my favorite moments in the movie is when Batman goes to see Andrea in, I guess, present time or whatever, and they're at that apartment, and Andrea just really burns them with that, the only person who's still controlled by their parents is you. And I find that moment really gives us a good example of how tragedy sent one person here, one person that way, and just how it can warp someone so twisted in one way, just pure revenge, pure vengeance, and then you have the other person who just wants justice. It's a neat little dichotomy, I think. It's just like a neat little example on how tragedy kind of... Similar tragedy, I guess, sort of sends people into vastly different directions. And that scene is just really brutal.
Right, because both of them just sort of want no one else to go through what they have.
Yeah, they just want to be happy.
Yeah, they just want to be happy. No one else to go through what they've been through. But they both have very differing opinions as to how that should be done.
Yep.
And something else that I thought was very powerful is, by the same token, toward the end, this is after Andrea is trying to knock off the Joker, and that doesn't quite pull it off. And Batman's trying to talk her down, and he says, "But what will vengeance solve?" And she just fires back, "Well, if anyone would know, it's you." And the key thing is Bruce has no answer to that himself.
Yeah.
It's not until Alfred in the final scene where, you have that remark about how, he stands on the edge of the abyss, but he hasn't fallen in, unlike Andrea. And he kind of needs Alfred as the father figure to tell him, no, you're okay.
Well, is that it then? Is that ultimately throughout all of his tragedy, Bruce Wayne still had a father figure?
I think that's a really, really big part of it. And what this movie does so well that we never really see anywhere else, except for maybe Beware the Batman, debatably, is how big of a role Alfred plays in Bruce Wayne's life, whether he knows it or not. Alfred plays a strong role in guiding, Bruce Wayne down the right path or whatever. And we see what could happen if there's no father figure there with Andrea.
That's true. Yeah.
And we're talking in the sense that, we both know that Andrea did have a father into her early adult life, but, you're still doing a lot of growing up at that point.
Yeah. I was by no means an adult when I was, early 20s.
Right.
I'm probably not one now. But Todd, just a quick question. You picked up the Blu-ray, right?
Yes, I did.
Looks fantastic, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I think they did a fine job.
Night and day. Yeah.
Early DVD circa, the first half of the double O's, and you update that, it seems like there really is a meaningful gap. I think the earlier DVDs were kind of upgrading from VHS, and that was fine. But when they actually go back to the original stock and just do it fresh, it's night and day, and I think that's certainly true for Phantasm.
I know a bunch of people sort of balked at picking it up because, there's no extras. But I think this is an exception where it's well worth picking it up just to see the actual movie in HD and so clean, so clear, almost so bright, I guess. It's when I rewatched it there a while ago when I first got the Blu-ray, it was a huge difference.
Well, I mean, if the argument is it deserved a release on par with what the Iron Giant received, there is no debate from me, but...
Agreed, it totally does.
Even so, it's a quality, straightforward release, and maybe the time for it comes later. In the interim, this is one of the great Batman works, and if you're going to get more stuff or better stuff, you got to show up and vote with money.
Agreed.
I mean, certainly the argument can be made that if not the best, it is one of the best.
Yep. Oh, I think it totally is. Man, I rewatched the Nolan movies, and as great as they are, plot holes galore, dude. Just plot holes galore. And eventually they just kind of become more apparent with each viewing.
I would argue that Phantasm is perhaps a bit more timeless than The Dark Knight, in the sense that The Dark Knight is best understood and appreciated in a post 9/11 context, maybe. To a point, it is. I think that's fair to say.
It's a product of its time for sure.
You're listening to the Toonzone Podcast. Hang tight, we'll be right back after this quick music break. Todd, you wanted to talk about Young Justice?
Yeah, sure. So as we know, season 3 is coming up sometime in 2018. It's going to be part of DC's, or rather Warner Brothers' digital service with live-action Teen Titans. This was a big deal to a lot of people because, it was beloved by fans. They lobbied like hell for it. It actually happened. I still can't believe it, honestly. My opinion on that was, nah.
I know, same here.
This is like wishing for Teen Titans season 6. Get over it. But no, they did it, and it seems to me that fandom for that is more passionate than anything I've seen for anything related in the last 15 years. So I'd be curious for everybody's thoughts on just what it was that got that commitment from people.
Or also tell Eileen why she should watch the show.
Yes, absolutely.
I think, the first season was, I don't want to say it's perfect. It had its problems, and you kind of have to accept the idea of the Justice League sending kids on, covert ops. Super dangerous covert ops, to kind of push that to the wayside. But you can't sort of have the character interaction. I love the personality conflicts. I don't know. You see that in that series, the clear sort of character development and progress from episode 1 to episode 26. You just see a really great progression in terms of character, in terms of storyline, and how it grows increasingly complex as it goes along.
Andrei, what's your impression of the show?
Well, I enjoyed it a lot. I thought the first season was better if I had to pick one, but the second is good as well. I don't know, it tried to cover too many storylines at once, I think. But the show is great overall, and I can see why it has many fans. I wasn't as impressed with it as others, but I am glad to have it back. I am actually more impressed with it returning, the fact that it is returning.
Yeah, I think for me, what was very interesting about Young Justice was how it was really the first time in quite some time that somebody dared to do a superhero show where everybody who, really mattered was somebody the target audience could directly relate to.
Yes.
Justice League, great show with a bunch of adults working with each other. Young Justice, it just hit a different level with people, and I think that really helped it, catch on because everybody had a favorite they could identify with to some degree or another.
Who was your favorite character, and who had the most plot development, character development over time?
I'm going to get on my soapbox and say the answer to both of those questions is actually Aqualad. And
Agreed,
the reason
100%.
for that is Aqualad is somebody who pretty much takes on leadership because as the older person and the most composed person and the one who feels the most responsibility, it's more or less thrust upon him. And he's starting out as, a young, not quite man who wants to do more to somebody who is utterly carrying the world on his shoulders in season 2. And it almost breaks him, not quite though. And the way he comes out of that and shows the adults who's boss is immensely satisfying to me. I was deeply impressed by what they did with Aqualad.
And who do you guys think was shorted?
That's a tough one. I would say Robin.
Well, maybe that's because in so many other series, he ends up being the focus too often.
True, and that's probably a good chunk of it. We already kind of know who Robin is. One thing that really worked for Young Justice, I found, is that it introduced a new audience to a lot of the characters who they might not really know a lot about. Like, outside of comics, I can't see a lot of people who know who Kid Flash is, or Miss Martian, or even Aqualad. And I find that true, they use Robin as a really good sort of starting point, like an entry point to meet these other new characters. There's a reason why, like, Young Justice opens with Batman and Robin. I think they're the more recognizable icons in the series. Then it sort of branches out from there. But granted, I don't think his role in this show was really meant to be super pivotal as opposed to Aqualad. But granted, I guess he does have a few good character building episodes, like him realizing that he's not fit for leadership is probably a good character moment for him.
Yeah, actually, that was really powerful when he realized that being exactly like Batman was not for him.
Yeah.
And that's like a big deal because in Young Justice, more than anywhere else, they really play up Bruce as a father figure.
And I just remembered right now, I completely forgot about the episode where they basically spend the whole episode talking to Black Canary about their fears. Man, that was a good episode. And I think I just really torpedoed my argument for Robin.
Let's just keep in mind that the psychology episode was also balanced by For Other People who combined into a giant robot, so A-list episode. Listen, if there's a robot, it's got to go to the top of the list. That's my rule.
I found that, saying Robin is possibly the weakest point in the whole team isn't necessarily a bad thing considering just how well-defined the rest of the characters are. Like, I can really see why people fell for Artemis. She was put in a rough spot from her first appearance, and you really rooted for her to sort of succeed. Everyone loves a jokester with Kid Flash. Much like you, Todd, I sort of really dug Aqualad in this series. How they, like, their take on him, I think, is probably like the take on Aqualad. Like, I can't, like, even I haven't read all the Aqualad comics, but I can't think of one where he's more of a real tangible person than in this series. I think maybe the only thing they might have dropped the ball on a shade would be the whole Superboy and Miss Martian stuff. I really enjoyed both those characters. I loved what they're trying to do with Superboy, how they're trying to sort of shape this chaotic person into something more upright, more heroic, I guess. Miss Martian, I love the idea that just how layered in deception she is. I don't mean that in like a bad way. Just all these sort of things that she puts upon herself just like the deep hole she buries herself in because she's worried about what people think about her, be it her real form or her human form. Just they made her, I found, a really flawed person. I kind of wish the big thing that I really didn't like about Young Justice season 2 is what she did to Superboy. I found that really kind of negated a lot of her development in season 1. It works in a way, but I find that it also kind of takes away a lot of what they were trying to sort of build her up to at the end of season 1 as someone who is sort of overcoming her shortcomings, and then once she does the Superboy, why they eventually part, that left a really bad taste in my mouth.
Well, see, that's an interesting topic for me because the way I look at it is this. In season 1, what was interesting about the Superboy Miss Martian bond was the show essentially built up toward bringing together the two people that were looking for acceptance the most. Superboy was trying to get Superman to notice him. Martian was trying to win approval. She was trying to hide her true self because she thought what she really looked like and the kind of being she truly was would freak out everyone else. And it's an interesting paradox because in season 2 we see she's actually gotten over that, and she's not afraid to show herself to others. She's a lot more confident in the use of her powers, right? But
it's her power usage in season 2.
Right, but that's the thing. What happens, the mistake she made in season 2 was a result of her getting too aggressive and too sure of herself and what she was doing. And so what happens? She doesn't want to be judged, be spurned for her mistakes. So what does she do? She tries to fiddle with Superboy's memory, erase the mistake, make it go away. When the healthy thing would have been to acknowledge the mistake, say you're sorry, move on.
Yeah.
She tried to cover it. She tried to keep secrets. Again, secrets and lies. That's what drives the show. And keeping that secret, trying to deceive, it put the relationship off the rails.
Yep.
And I think what you see in season 2 is maybe the hope that she'll recover from that and the relationship will recover from that, or maybe it won't. But at the least, they can at least be friends again. And for my money, that's not terrible.
Well, they do seem to sort of give the slight impression of maybe a forthcoming redemption arc for her. Does she warrant redemption? Does she need it, or is there anything, or does she have anything to even redeem? What do you think, Todd?
I would argue that the entire incident with Aqualad's mind being broken was the wake-up call she needed. And there is no way she would ever go that far again. In fact, what we saw in the back half of season 2 was her being too afraid to do anything lest she abuse her power, and that was a healthy reaction, but it was also an overreaction, and she needed to get over it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, will she be a good person going forward? Yeah, I think she learned something from her experience. And let's remember, even parallel to her problems with abuse of power, she was a mother figure to Garfield / Beast Boys. So it's not like she had no redeeming quality. Was she flawed? Yes. As was Artemis flawed with her secret keeping in season 1. As was Robin's disappearing habit in season 1. On and on down the list, right? So, I mean, Miss Martian's mistakes were particularly prominent and weighty, so I get why that's making people go, whoa, what the hell? But does it make her irredeemable? I mean, my God, of course not.
So what do you guys want to see out of season 3? Where do you want to see it go?
That's a tough one. I can't remember the log line off the top of my head for season 3. I believe they're going into outer space to tackle, is it international slave trading?
Not necessarily outer space exclusively, but they've been very clear that the metahuman trafficking would be an issue. Basically, everybody, because of season 2, people on Earth know that there's a quote-unquote metagene that gives people powers. You had 2 alien races in season 2 that were trying to exploit that before it was even in the open, and now it is. So that's going to catch on. There's no doubt that Vandal Savage's agenda will be involved. We know he's working with Darkseid on Apocalypse, so no doubt all of that will factor in.
Agreed. As cliched as it sounds, it just seems like they're sort of stepping things up in terms of just how far they can explore, just some pretty weighty stuff. Like you have to admit, in season 1 and 2, they do deal with some pretty heavy stuff from time to time, and even like just just to get back to Miss Martian, that's some pretty heavy stuff for like a young audience to deal with, and you got to sort of give props to the show for not easing back on that. They definitely put their flaws out in the open. You got to give the show credit for that. And I'm really curious myself, with this show now being on a digital service, how they're going to balance, how they're going to, I guess, maybe make sure they keep themselves in check with how far they can go with the show.
Yeah, I would hope that in terms of content, they'll be a little more free, but mostly not change. We don't need to see blood gushing everywhere or anything like that. But I think what is true is, they can be a little more. They can have a different storytelling structure. It's sort of what we've seen Voltron, Legendary Defender on Netflix get. They don't have to pace it the way a conventional broadcast show would be, that they can take a different approach. The creative stuff has been very open about the fact that the format lets them do things in a way that a TV network wouldn't. And so how the Young Justice crew adjust for this format will be very interesting.
Because you're more likely to not have quite as many filler episodes on the streaming services because you're not like blocked into that 13 episode story arc.
Yeah, I think they might feel they have more space to breathe and to build up to things. Although I imagine they'll still have at least one mission of interest every episode.
Todd, I think you wanted to mention the Batman Telltale?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. For those who may not know, Telltale is in the business of creating basically interactive games that more or less run like a visual novel, a choose your own adventure type experience, basically living a novel on television in game format, more or less. And certain events are foreordained, but how your character reacts to what's happening will influence how things play out to a point, and it will impact your relationships. So
it does follow the same formula as the other Telltale games in that.
Yes, you cannot change your ultimate fate, but how you deal with it and how it affects the people around you, you can influence. And I find that pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And in the context of Telltale Batman, they try very hard to play up the conscious choice between, leaning toward Batman being the key persona or Bruce Wayne being the key persona. And also there's some decision making to go on where you draw the line and how far you'll go. Like I think it was somewhere in the middle of the first Telltale Batman story, Batman's confronting a mobster, and he has the choice to interrogate him with a big nasty Batman voice or to impale him on a sharp piece of metal and make him suffer and force him to talk. And either you do that and you get some info and the press roasts you for it, or you don't and things go a somewhat different way. And the impact of those choices kind of build on one another. Like if you are a really harsh Batman, people will not be so trusting of you later, and they'll react to you a little differently. And so it's an interesting experience. I think there's enough there where you would play through it twice, and just make completely different choices just to see how it goes. And it's not too heavy of a time investment, and you'll have an interesting time with it.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty neat spin. I kind of appreciate that Telltale is trying to cement this as their own unique take on Batman, with the big change up to his parents, for example, John Doe as well. I think John Doe is actually pretty interesting. Riddler, I found was a bit touch and go. I'm not super sold on him, but I don't know. I kind of like the twist on Batman's criminals turned out to be. Batman's parents turned out to be criminals. I thought that was a neat spin on it.
That was a hell of a hook for the first chapter of the first episode.
I know, right? It's a great cliffhanger, and you were kind of hoping that it wasn't actually, true, but then his world just kind of crumbles from there.
Yeah. Since we are in spoiler territory already, I have to say I love the ending of chapter 1 where Bruce hears this and he's basically stormed into the Batcave and he's like yelling at Alfred to please tell him it's not. It's like, Alfred! What the hell, man? You didn't.
Yes, that's a great scene. Man, poor Alfred. He's put upon so hard in the Telltale series. Jeez, poor dude.
And actually, yeah, that's another thing Telltale Batman handles very well. Poor Alfred tries so hard to empathize with you, and you can choose to act like Alfred's surrogate son, or you can just blow him off and feel like a horrible person. I mean, that is a degree of choice they give you. And actually, in something that's very compelling in the second story they're telling now is that certain events in the first one have a pretty dire effect on Alfred psychologically. And it's obvious from the way they're approaching this that things you do will either help with that or potentially make it much worse. And the killer is you may not even realize what you've done until after you've done it.
Mm.
So, man, if I think they're getting set to get into psychology and
Yes.
a way fans of Batman the Animated Series will really appreciate.
So if you were to rate the game from 1 to 10 as an overall game, between story, sound, animation, and everything, where would you put it?
Story is first rate. Graphics are basically a cel-shaded realist style. I would say it's I would argue it invokes a comic bookish feeling, though if you're looking for a stylized interpretation, this is not for you.
Yep.
It looks very real for better and for worse, but I think it works. In terms of gameplay, it's honestly pretty passive. You will have a few quick time events, and unless you're a cripple or half asleep, you will probably pass them all with ease.
Well, I'm sure that some of the people that are gonna play this game are probably fans of the way Telltale does games.
Yeah.
So that probably wouldn't be an issue for them.
I think you know what you're getting, and if you want a Batman smashing people, that's what the Arkham games are for.
Yeah.
This is all about story, and it will do just enough to get you immersed in it and forget you're playing a game.
Huh. Agreed. Yeah. That's the best way to put it. You just kind of want to see where the story goes. It becomes more about the journey as opposed to mashing some buttons to put a fist through someone's face.
So you think people should check it out?
Yes, absolutely.
Cool.
Yes, it will redefine Batman and his links to the villains you're used to in ways you wouldn't expect.
Agreed. I think especially fans of Batman the Animated Series would kind of really dig it.
To wit, the aforementioned John Doe is somebody who is a well-known Batman villain, and what they do with him is completely unlike what's been done in any on-screen work.
Oh, sounds cool.
Yeah, I am bending over backwards and not spoiled who John Doe is. Go play the game, you'll find out.
Okay.
I'm not kidding. It is too good for me to screw up. I'm not going to do it. So that's going to be our show today. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us, and
Yes.
we'll be back again soon because there'll be more to talk about, and I'm sure we'll do an episode like this again because there will be no shortage of DC media in the days to come.
And Andrei and Jim, it's been a really great pleasure to get to speak with you guys for the first time.
Likewise.
Same here, my pleasure. Anytime you want me again, I'm free. If you can handle hearing me again.
Oh yeah, of course. It was really fun to have you. Yeah, we'll definitely have you guys back on in the future. Thanks so much. All music featured in this episode is used with the permission of the artist and longtime Toons owner, Karl Olson, aka Ultra Klystron. Check out his latest album, An Identity Crisis, at his Bandcamp at ultraklystron.bandcamp.com.